in. We will have remarks from former Vice President Al Gore in just a few minutes, maybe between 3 and 5 minutes. We will be ready to go. So thanks for hanging out.
Check, check, mic check, 1, 2. Mic check, check, 1, 2. Check, check, 1, 2, check. Completely lost. It's all good, we've just got one level. Check, check. Check, check, mic check, 1, 2. Check, check.
Yeah?
Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. We're going to start this afternoon session, and I'd like to, first of all, thank the sponsors of this pavilion, and thank you for coming. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker for this afternoon is someone you probably know and probably needs no introduction, but I will. Uh, former Vice President Al Gore, former Senator, Chairman of the and founder of Climate Reality Project, and friend, Nobel laureate. This man is really done a lot for putting climate change and climate solutions on the map. So we are really pleased that he decided to take our invitation and join us. Former Vice President Al Gore. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I'll take the mic.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I want to thank those in back for the standing ovation. I appreciate it very much. Dr. Robert Bullard, thank you, my dear friend. And I want to acknowledge all of the distinguished guests here as a group. They're wanting you to come over and take the seat of honor here, Bob. Yeah, it's all right. It's happened before. But I want to thank Peggy Shepard, my dear friend, and Dr. Betsy Wright, along with Dr. Bullard. The four of us have worked together for a long time. And where Dr. Bullard is concerned, you know, this environmental justice movement has become the center and the beating heart and the vibrant soul of the entire climate movement worldwide. I want to congratulate all of you who have done this work. I could talk a long time in speculating why the environmental justice movement has become central to the climate movement. But all I'm going to do is give you my opinion. I believe that the climate justice movement has been in closer touch with the sense of right and wrong and social justice that lives in the heart of every human being who is made aware of the need for justice. And that's what has motivated this movement. And there are different narratives tracing the history of this movement. And I'm not claiming to have an authoritative version, but I do know that in 1982, in Warren County, North Carolina, there was an effort to dump poisonous chemical waste, PCBs, adjacent to a community. You know this history, don't you? There you go. Yeah, all right. And the community said, no, we don't want it. And the trucks started coming in, and I won't say the entire community, but a good portion of the community, they went out there and laid their bodies down in the path of those dump trucks, and they stopped them cold. And they stayed there for a long time, and they were unwilling to be moved. Now, that struggle kept on going, but eventually the community won that struggle. And there are many who say that was the birth of the environmental justice movement. There are some indigenous activists out west who have narratives that are parallel to this. But yes, and there are other communities that have risen up and really struggled and become victorious. And their struggles made me aware of it back when I was talking about climate decades ago in the Congress, and I organized the first congressional hearings on the climate crisis, and I did not have the language to integrate the environmental justice issues into it in a compelling way. I needed to learn. And that's where my teacher, Dr. Robert Bullard, came in. In 1990, he published Dumping in Dixie. That was your first book, wasn't it? First environmental book. All right, and he's had many since then. So I worked with the late, great Congressman John Lewis. Oh my gosh, what a hero, an icon, one of the pantheon of great American heroes. I was in the Senate at that time, and Congressman John Lewis was representing his district in Atlanta in the House of Representatives, and he and I all co-authored the first environmental justice legislation. Now, and when we introduced it, we had hearings to try to build the case. And the first witness we had was Dr. Robert Bullard, who came and educated everybody that was in that hearing room. Now, I have to tell you that we were not able to get a majority of votes in the House and Senate to pass that legislation. However, as luck would have it, of course, you know the old saying from the football coach, the harder I work, the luckier I get. As luck would have it, I got into the White House as vice president, and I talked to President Bill Clinton about it, and I said, look, John Lewis and I tried to pass this legislation. John nominated me for vice president in the Democratic Convention that year, by the way. But after I got in there, I talked to then President Clinton, and we drafted for him an executive order that took all the provisions of that law that we weren't able to get passed in the Congress, and President Clinton signed it, and that became and remains today the principal legal authority to pursue environmental justice in the United States of America. And it became a model for many other countries who took it as the template for how they were going to pursue environmental justice. Now, we've come a long way, but we have a much longer way to go, because there are communities all across the U.S., all across Africa, all across Europe, every continent, where the pollution is dumped on communities that have been deprived of the political and economic power to resist and hold off the pollution. You know the story. And this group includes so many activists who have won great victories, and I salute you. I want to tell you a brief story about Memphis, Tennessee. Just last year, they wanted to bring a big, high-pressure oil pipeline from the Permian Basin oil fields and gas fields in Texas and bring it from west to east right across Memphis, Tennessee. And where did they put the path of that pipeline? Well, you can guess. They snaked it through a 97% black community. And the community is called Boxtown. Boxtown was a freedman's community. And the population is 97% black today and low income. And they are suffering the burden of excess pollution. And they wanted to put it right through that community and directly over the Memphis Aquifer. The Memphis Aquifer is an underground fresh water reservoir, and Memphis is the largest city in North America that gets 100% of its drinking water from an underground aquifer. And they have what they call an extraction zone, which is where the clay lining that protects the aquifer from activities on the surface has already been breached, so they can pull the water up to get access for drinking. And there's several of them. But they took it right through, they were going to take it right through the extraction zone that was serving the black community. And I drove my van, it was during the pandemic, so I drove my camper van to Memphis, and I parked it in the parking lot of Graceland and got up, true story, and got up the next morning, went out and made the speech out there, and I called it, "This is a reckless, racist ripoff." It's reckless because it threatens the drinking water and the health of the community. It's racist because it's aimed at a minority black community. And it's a ripoff because this oil company gets the benefits and all of the risk and all of the damage is put onto the people. A reckless, racist ripoff. Now, the good news is, I'm telling this story in a way that sort of implies I deserve the credit for killing this thing, and that's not the truth. It's a little tiny bit of the truth. But the real credit for it came from the young black activists in the community. They started organizing, and they went door to door, and they had rallies, and they had church services and concerts, and they raised such an effective protest that the entire community of Memphis was convinced, and they said, no, we're going to stop this thing. And they stopped it dead in its tracks, and it was a great victory. But, as Mr. Harvey used to say, here's the rest of the story. Right after that victory, the oil companies went to the Tennessee State Legislature, which they own lock, stock, and oil barrel, and they got them to pass a new law that says from now on forward, no community anywhere in the state of Tennessee can block any fossil fuel infrastructure project, because their legacy network of political influence and financial influence is such that when they say to some of these state governments, jump, the state government says, yes, sir, how high you want me to jump? And they are just owned by it. And that is the case in communities all around the world. And so we've got to change that. We've got to change it. You know, when I made a speech here on Monday, I quoted the famous phrase from Abraham Lincoln, where he said, the occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we will save our country. Those words have moved me and so many others, in my case, since I first read them. And I went and looked up the word disenthrall. Where'd that come from? It comes from the word thrall, T-H-R-A-L-L. It's a Scandinavian word, and I dug into the history of it. That means I went on Google and Googled my way to figure out what was going on. That's what we do these days, and unless you happen to have the privilege of being in Dr. Bullard's class. Thrall, T-H-R-A-L-L. It was an ancient form of voluntary slavery in Scandinavia. So the word disenthrall means waking up and saying, why do I want to be voluntarily enslaved? I don't want to be. Let's throw off that mental form of slavery. Our world, much of our world, is enthralled to the fossil fuel industry. And they use their money to keep it going and keep us mentally enslaved. But it's killing our world. They represent a culture of death. What do I mean by that? They dig up dead life forms from eons ago in the ground and recklessly burn them in ways that create death around this planet. And they're putting the heat-trapping pollution into the sky. And the sky is just this very thin shell around the planet. If you could drive a car straight up in the air at interstate highway speed, you'd get to the top of it in 5 minutes. That's how thin it is. And all the global warming pollution would be below you. And we're adding 162 million tons every day. And it's adding up to the point where it traps as much extra heat every day as would be released by 600,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every 24 hours. That's why we've had the hottest years ever measured in the last 8 years. That's why 20 of the 21 hottest years in all of history have been since 2002. That's why Lake Mead and Lake Powell in the American West are at dead pool status. That's why the Mississippi River is at the lowest levels it's ever been. And all around the world, the same thing is true of the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers in the cradle of civilization. The great Yangtze River in China, the Loire River in France, the Po River in Italy, the Rhine River in Germany. All over the world, they're destroying humanity's future, and they want to keep going. Now let's talk for a minute about offsets. One of the polluters in Memphis was contacted by the black community who was breathing in their poison, and they said, we read in the newspaper where you have made a commitment to net zero. When are we going to be able to stop breathing your pollution? Because, of course, they're downwind from it. And they said, oh, no, we're going to meet our commitment by planting trees in Bolivia, so we're good. Offsets. Well, maybe they have a small role to play, very small. But the use of offsets to empower the continuation of pollution has to be looked at very, very carefully, because these big polluters want to take every single alternative to actually reducing their pollution. Now they're promoting this idea called geoengineering. Has anybody heard of that? They want to put a different kind of pollution in the sky, sulfur dioxide, to block out some of the sun's rays in order to try to cool off the planet. If that sounds crazy to you, you are thinking about it correctly. What it would mean is, well, for starters, they can't put a price tag on this, so they don't care about it. But our children would never again see the stars at night. Is that okay? Turns out it would also block the sun from the solar panels. It would also block the photosynthesis from the plants. But what would it do? It would allow the petroleum and fossil fuel companies to keep on dumping their waste in the sky. That's the objective of geoengineering, to do anything to let them keep on polluting. I just need everybody to get going to stop this craziness. Now, 2 weeks ago, Dr. Bullard and I and the Climate Reality Project, and Phyllis Cutno is here. Where is Phyllis Cutno, the CEO and president of the Climate Reality Project? She's got her arm up waving in the back there. We had a climate reality training in Cancer Alley. Cancer Alley extended toward Houston. We went along the ship canal, and I got on the bus with Dr. Bullard, and we took a tour called a toxic tour. And we went to all these toxic sites, and let me tell you, it won't surprise you, but people who go to Houston, Texas, they see the gleaming skyscrapers, and they see the business activity, and they see the manicured lawns in the beautiful neighborhoods. They don't see what's going on in the ship canal. East of Houston, there is a 50-mile long ship canal, and on either side of it, you have refineries and petrochemical plants and plastics manufacturing and pollution like you've never seen before. And that's where the majority of the black population is. And that's where the wind takes the pollution over their houses and communities. This is true in so many places, and we had a wonderful training there, and we are going to continue this training. The Climate Reality Project is committed to environmental justice and climate justice, and we need to get your advice. We want your advice and your help on how we can be as effective as possible. But let me close by saying that here at this COP 27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, I'm delighted and thrilled to see so many climate justice advocates, because as I began my remarks by saying, this is the heart and soul of the climate movement. And we need that kind of passion and commitment to get some action here at COP 27. We've had enough pledges. We've had enough promises. We've had enough words and palabras. We need deeds and action and commitment, and we need to cut the pollution. And if anybody doubts we have the political will to get that done, always remember, political will is itself a renewable resource. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you everyone for coming today. If you want to hear more very important information about climate justice and the many issues within that, our next panel is 1:30 p.m. and that is Global Grassroots Climate Leaders on Environmental Justice. Join us at 1:30.